Part 35. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 341. I've seen the ferry. This is Chunan, the southern part of Chuzhu. Awu straightened his clothes and said seriously. Niao was surprised to see Awu. In the past, Awu was very sloppy and his speech was not formal. He had never seen Awu like this since he could remember. But when he thought about the monk in front of him, he couldn't help but stand up straight. Have you arrived in Chuzhu? Mengwei murmured to himself. She only remembered that she was knocked into the sea by a huge wave. She was not able to swim and was weak. After a period of panic, her spiritual power was exhausted and she fainted. Then she asked, "Did you save me?" Awu pointed at the bird beside him and said, "Fairy, he saved you." He. Mengwei suppressed the fire in his lower abdomen, and then his eyes fell on the wound on Niao's wrist. Licking his lips, the remaining medicinal smell smelled of blood. "Thank you," Mengwei said lightly and wanted to get up. She could see that these two people were mortals and it was inappropriate for her to stay here. She also needed to find a place to practice and heal. The medicine could only wake her up, not make her recover. "Fairy, let a Niao take you there. Her place is quiet and usually no one is around. There are too many mortals in this village." Ao asked seriously. Mengwei was slightly startled, but still nodded. Since he drank the bird's blood, maybe he passed out again and the blood could save him once more. Besides, it's not bad to be far away from the village and have someone you can call upon. Lead the way. When Mengwei turned around, he took out a fan magical weapon from his waist and placed it on the table. "Thank you. This was made by Sun Suanhua for her when she was still in Yaluo sect. But it was of no use to her at this time." Although Awu said that Niao saved her, Mengwei could see that everything was led by Awu. "Fairy, this." Awu was very surprised. "Just take it." After saying that, she walked towards the outside of the house. Niao quickly followed and said, "Fairy, please follow me." At this moment, he was completely lost. Mengwei's face had regained some color, his face was white and rosy, and he spoke softly and softly. It was already incredibly beautiful, but at this moment, Niao felt even more overwhelmed. Where could he have any other thoughts? "Fairy, wait." Just when Mengwei walked out of the door, Ao suddenly shouted. Mengwei stopped and frowned slightly. "What else is there?" "Fairy, I have an unkind favor." Awu clasped his hands in his fists and bent down respectfully. "Explain." "If the fairy can recover, I would like to ask the fairy to take Niao to where he belongs." Mengwei looked back at Niao and then at Awu, his eyes flickering. She is willing to go to Niao's side because she actually knows that Niao is definitely not a human being. He looks like a mortal on the outside, but his blood can save people. Not only that, Niao's blood even fueled the fire in her dantian. The reason why it is so hot is mainly because of the blood. Mengwei had given up all his previous skills and specialized in the spirit fire symbiosis technique and external fire technique. When I came to Chuzhu, I also tried to find some earth vein fire to practice. Listening to Awu's words, she thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "I'll do my best." After saying that, she looked at Niao meaningfully and said, Let's go to your house first." "Yes, fairy." Niao was a little confused. He had asked Awu before where he came from. Awu just smiled and said that it was given to him when he was hunting birds, so he would often turn into a bird. Of course Niao wouldn't take it seriously, thinking that Awu didn't know either, so he would make such a joke with him. But now it sounded like Awu knew a lot. If you think about it more carefully, the witch can even save a monk. This ability. His mind was filled with random thoughts until he took Mengwei back to his home several miles away. The fire outside the house has been extinguished, and the fish soup in the pot has burned dry, exuding a burnt smell. Niao patted his forehead and said, "Fairy, please forgive me for the shabby home. I'll clean it up first." He felt that the burnt smell would pollute Mengwe's temperament, so he hurriedly went to clean it up. Mengwe smiled and pushed into the house. The room was extremely messy. Her eyes swept over it, and finally landed in a relatively clean corner. Then she said to Niao, "I need to practice for a while. You are not allowed to enter the room until I come out. Do you understand?" Niao said repeatedly, "Yes, Fairy, no one usually comes to my place." Mengwe felt relieved. She was just healing her wounds. Unlike practicing, she would not go crazy because of interruptions. Once she recovers from her injuries, she can leave here. As for Ao's words, she didn't think about it for the time being. After all, I was only in the qi refining stage, how could I help a mortal find a home? Mengwe waved his hand, closed the door, and then sat in that corner. First, he practiced the spirit fire symbiosis technique to strengthen the connection between the earth fire and himself, and then began to use the fire power to heal himself. When she fell into the sea, she failed to control her spiritual power in a hurry, and some of her meridians were burned from the inside out by the spiritual fire. She found it in time, but there was no way to heal her injuries in the water, and she didn't have any elixirs. He could only force himself to float above the sea and let the wild waves rage, and then he fainted. Mengwe was so immersed in her mental cultivation that when she felt it was almost the same, it was already dark outside. Looking carefully, several hours have passed. Only then did she get up and open the door. Outside the house, the firelight flickered, and it turned out that Niao was cooking fish soup. The aroma overflowed and hit his nose. Mengwe hadn't eaten for a long time, and he didn't have the Bigo pill, so he was aroused by his greed. "Fairy, are you okay?" When Niao heard the door open, he looked up and saw Mengwe, but he was in a hurry. He took a wooden bowl and filled it with fish soup, intending to deliver it to Mengwe himself. Unexpectedly, Mengwe crossed the threshold with a chuckle and said, "Just sit outside and eat." Sitting on a pony stand very casually, Niao put the bowl into her hands. "Fairy, this is an ordinary sea fish. I went to fish it out of the sea while you were in the house." Niao seemed to want to show that the fish was fresh and that she could eat it with confidence. Mengwe didn't take it seriously. He took a sip and said, "You can eat it too. It's occupying your room. Fairy, you eat first, I'm fine." Niao didn't know how big the monk's appetite was, and always subconsciously thought that it would take a lot of effort for the monk to go to heaven and earth. If you use too much strength, your appetite will naturally be astonishing. She was afraid that Mengwe would not have enough to eat. "Sit down when I ask you to." Mengwe pretended to be angry. "Yes, yes, yes." Niao is serious, and he is walking on thin ice when facing someone who even a witch would be in awe of. He sat tremblingly on the other side, with nowhere to put his hands. Seeing the fun, Mengwe smiled and said, "Why, are you afraid of me?" "Ah, no. No." Niao quickly shook his head, thought for a moment, and then said, "Fairy, you must be kind-hearted. I heard a Wu say before that many monks regard mortals as ants, and they just kill them easily. So let me keep telling me not to go to Chu. The northern land is just afraid that I will die. I am a little flattered that the fairy is so polite to me." Hearing such incoherence, Mengwe felt secretly amused, and thought to himself, "This is because you don't know my reputation in Yeazhu. A dignified demonic witch is actually said to be kind-hearted. The number of people who killed Wanjian Mountain was not even 1,000, but 800, right?" Mengwe thought about it, and suddenly realized that he was completely different from before. Suddenly, she was a little confused. When did she start to change her gender? But as I thought about it, Zuyun couldn't help but appear in my mind. From a little kid to a monk who could protect herself from the wind and rain, she couldn't help but laugh again. Niao looked even more nervous. The fairy was smiling and dazed at the same time. He won't get angry later, right? Oh Wu, what kind of medicine are you selling in your gourd? Why do you let the fairy live in my house? You really don't think that I have any undue thoughts about fairies, do you? By the way, doesn't anyone usually come here when you are here? Meng Wei finished the fish soup, patted his belly and asked. There is no one here. The village here is the most remote. And since I moved here, even if someone comes, they are from the village. But I should tell the villagers not to disturb the fairy's healing in the near future. As Niao said, he suddenly thought of Zhu Feng and said, by the way, fairy, just before you were fished out of the sea by the village chief and the others, there was a little kid passing by. He said he also fell into the water. I heard a Wu said, he may also be a monk, will he come with you? Meng Wei's eyes tightened and he asked quickly, where are the others? If there were monks, she wouldn't be able to stay here long. With my own strength at this time, if I encounter someone a little stronger, I will die. Ah, he's gone. Niao was also shocked by Meng Wei's reaction and said quickly, at first I thought he was just an ordinary doll, so I gave him a bowl of fish soup. After drinking it, he asked me for some information, then he ran away like a gust of wind. Later, the village chief and others carried you, and we arrived at the village. When we talked about the baby, Ao said that he might also be a monk. After Niao finished speaking, he thought that since Meng Wei had asked the question, he might know him, so he simply said, by the way, fairy, the little kid said his name is Zhu Feng. In an instant, Meng Wei's bowl slipped to the ground. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 342. Tell me again, what is his name? Meng Wei was shocked back to his senses by the sound of the bowl being dropped. He quickly stood up and shouted sweetly to Niao. Bless, wish the wind. Niao was frightened. Meng Wei, who had always been gentle in front of him, was actually a little hysterical at this time. But he also believed that Meng Wei was with Zhu Feng. Maybe, it's a sibling relationship? At this moment, Zhu Feng had forgotten everything he said before. Of course, Niao also thought that Zhu Feng just said it casually, maybe because he was afraid of scaring him. More than 10 years old, Zhu Feng. Meng Wei murmured, sat back, suppressing the shock in his heart. Of course she knew who Zhu Feng was. When she was in Lingjian sect, she communicated with Ergu the most, and of course it was Zuyun who talked about the most topics. When talking about Zuyun, Ergu will talk about Zhu Feng. This is why Meng Wei chose to return to Barren Stone Mountain after leaving Lingjian sect. It's not that I want to have anything to do with Zhu Rong and his wife, I just want to take a look. After staying there for several days, I could often hear Zhu Rong and his wife talking about Zuyun and Zhu Feng respectively. When talking about Zuyun, Zhu Rong seemed careless, but he couldn't hide a hint of pride. But when it comes to Zhu Feng, his face is full of lamentation, and even more self-pity, saying that he didn't discipline him well before. He is still alive and has arrived in Chuzhu. Meng Wei murmured, then bit his lip and thought in his heart. From what Niao said, Zhu Feng is a monk, so. What did you say to him? Where did he go? Tell me the truth. A bird is like pouring beans from a bamboo tube. It was just a few words in itself, so he said it again. It seems that he went to the volcanic area to find the sect. Meng Wei fell into deep thought. From the little information, she could only guess that Zhu Feng would become a monk by fate, and after arriving in Chuzhu, he wanted to find a section, so, did he want to join the sect and embark on the path to immortality? It can be heard from Ergu that Zhu Feng was taken away by Tang Zhuyang, and when he met Zuyun again, he wanted to kill his master, and was finally abandoned by Zuyun on the island. Unexpectedly, he survived. This boy is not simple. Meng Wei decided in his heart that after he recovered from his injuries, he would disguise himself and go find Zhu Feng. According to Ergu, Zhu Feng hated Zuyun very much. And if he can live in the sea for 3 years, he may have endless adventures. However, Meng Wei was confident, and with his own strength, it was not difficult to deal with him. But she didn't know that Zhu Feng had already practiced magic skills, and her level was even higher than what she was before. "Fairy, do you know him?" At this time, a Niao suddenly asked again. "Yes, we know each other." Meng Wei didn't hide anything, but smiled. "I didn't expect him to come to Chezhu too. By the way, did he say anything else?" "No, he just left like that, without even saying hello." Meng Wei smiled, then changed the subject and asked about Niao's life experience. But Niao only said that he was picked up by Wu and knew nothing about the rest. Meng Wei rolled his eyes at him and said, "Wu won't ask me to take you to where you need to go without any reason. Tell me, what other secrets do you have?" "This." Niao hesitated for a moment, then said, "Fairy, sometimes I turn into a bird uncontrollably, and as I get older, the birds I turn into become bigger and bigger." "What?" Meng Wei's eyes suddenly widened. "If you can transform into a bird, then you are not a serious human race. Moreover, his blood can also fuel his own spiritual fire, so. Is this a spiritual beast? But what kind of bird spirit beast's blood has such effectiveness and can transform into human form so early? More importantly, Niao looks like a normal mortal. Whether it is his behavior or his words, it shows that there is no problem with his intelligence." "Fairy." Seeing Meng Wei standing there blankly, Niao cautiously called out tentatively. Meng Wei blinked and then said, "Can you turn into a bird and show me?" Niao opened his mouth but was speechless. After telling the secret in his heart, Niao said all the words he had nowhere to say to Meng Wei. Meng Wei listened with great interest. He put his hands on his chin and just listened to Niao's memories, starting from the moment he remembered them. At this time, in the Demon Refining Tower, Zuyun and Wuneng destroyed dozens of formations. But the Phantom formation still hasn't changed much, which makes Zuyun couldn't help but sigh, "This handwriting is simply too big and scary. I don't know how long it will take to set up this kind of formation." From this point of view, the original owner of the Demon Refining Tower was also an extremely terrifying existence. I don't know how it compares to Ye Yanglei. Thinking of this, Zuyun asked Wu Nan, "Anan, do you know Ye Yang?" After getting acquainted with the two of them, Zuyun became a little more intimate. "Ye Yang." Wu Nan smiled and said, "Why do you ask about this powerful man? As a Chezhu native, how could you not have heard of Ye Yang?" Zhu Yunzhen was bored, so he asked, "Then how much do you know?" "I don't know much, or in other words, what I know about Ye Yang, the monks in Chezhu should also know." While Wu Nen was digging a hole with a knife, he vomited bitterly and said, "I don't seem to know much." Wu Nan suddenly choked up. Thinking about it, it seems that this is indeed the case. Before Wu Nen became the clan leader, he had been practicing in the clan with Lin Wen and did not care about worldly affairs. Maybe the few things about Ye Yang are just hearsay, right? Zuyun smiled and said, "Then what do you know?" He was joking, but he didn't expect Wu Nan's words to be surprising. Ye Yang went to the spirit world after turning the Peeper realm upside down. What? Zuyun's eyes widened suddenly. Of course he knew that Ye Yang had been to Peeper realm, but he didn't expect that he had done such a big thing in Peeper realm. Moreover, he heard the word spirit world again. At that time, Lin Wen had talked about the spiritual world, but at that time he was focused on Lin Wen's explanation of his funeral, so he didn't pay much attention to it. At this moment, When I heard Wu Neng say it, I suddenly remembered. This is the level after the Peeper Realm. Wu Neng felt that Zuyun was making too much fuss, so he stopped and looked at Zuyun, and then at Wu Nan. Wu Nan also looked like he had seen a ghost. What I said, don't you know? No matter how slow his reaction was, he still felt that something was wrong. Nonsense, you are talking about things in the Peeper Realm, how do we know? Zuyun cursed and asked, did Mr. Lin tell you this? Yes, I have been studying and practicing with my husband. In my spare time, he tells me anecdotes about the Peeper Realm. Otherwise, how could I know? Hearing Wu Neng's rhetorical question, Zuyun quickly called Wu Nan to let him take over digging the hole. He smiled and said to Wu Neng, tell me, what else do you know about Yayong and Peeper Realm? Wu Neng scratched his head and said, it's nothing. The teacher said that Yayong made a big fuss in the Peeper Realm, and many sects and family forces suffered heavy losses. In the end, Yayong went to the spirit world, and it was their ancestor who took him there. Yes. But my husband said that these things are also popular in his clan. That's it? Is there anything more detailed? Zuyun asked questions, but secretly sighed in his heart. Yayong has been walking all the way. He shouldn't just hit him with a hammer if he doesn't like it, right? Look at what Chuzhu was smashed into, and look at Yunzhou again. The barren stone mountain is so strange, and it's the only one in Yunzhou. Could it be that he did it too? And Ye is who? All the magical weapons belonging to the ancestor of Wanjian Mountain were smashed to the ground by him. Then he smashed the Peeper Realm, all the way to the spirit world. His strength is a bit too terrifying, he is simply invincible. However, I don't know if he is in the spirit world. One can live for more than 1,000 years in the nascent soul stage. Yayong has reached the next level, and Chuzhu has always said that he was a person from 3,000 years ago. It is not known whether he has ascended to immortality. I don't know about this, but my husband seemed to have said that Yayong had good relations with the Lin family and passed down some things, but only their clan leader knew about it. Later, my husband said that their clan was exterminated, and he didn't know where those things were placed. Whenever he talks about this, Mr. Lin always sighs. He said that if he was strong enough at that time, he could find those treasures as tokens and then go to the spirit world to find Yayong Lei to help the Lin family take revenge. Hearing this, Zuyun's breathing suddenly became rapid. He had a hunch that he could guess where the Lin family's treasures were. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 343. When Lin Wen told him the past events with the help of the breaking void spirit eyes, as if explaining the funeral affairs, what left Zuyun with a deep memory was the lake. Countless powerful monks came from the other side of the lake. After a brutal killing, Lin Wen got up from the pile of corpses and threw all the corpses into the lake. At that time, Zuyun was still wondering whether it was the Lin family who carried out the water burial, but he didn't think much about it. So when Lin Wen knelt down and worshipped in front of the lake, Zuyun only thought that Lin Wen was doing courtesy to the elders of his tribe. But now I remembered again that there was no place to hide treasure in that vast grassland. Except in the lake. That is to say, the treasures that the Lin family obtained from Yayong at that time were most likely hidden at the bottom of the lake. Thinking of this, Zuyun could not suppress his excitement. It's not that he is greedy for these treasures, but he is trying to find out information about Yayong from them. Zuyun didn't know why he had such a strong interest in Yayong, but he subconsciously felt that a monk like Yayong who hit him with a hammer whenever he disagreed was very suitable for him. What else do you know? Zuyun asked. No, Wu Neng spread his hands and said, Sir, I always say that knowing too much is not good for my level. A person as powerful as Ye Yang is beyond the reach of ordinary people. Zhu Yun nodded slightly, thinking that Lin Wen was more discerning. What's more, Lin Wen's understanding of Ye Yang was on another level entirely. To be able to step out of the Peeper realm, he must have already reached the peak of the late nascent soul stage. And what is spread in Chuzhu and Yeazhu is at most the Danja period, right? However, in the Dan formation stage, Ye Yang's spiritual roots are really terrifying when he has such a prestigious reputation. After working hard for several hours and destroying some formation eyes, the illusory formation finally changed. Only noticing that the scene in front of them suddenly shook, the three of them quickly got on alert. Because no one knows what will appear in front of them after the illusion array disappears. Or is it like a no man's land, or facing a boundless tide of beasts? Be careful. Zhu Yun reminded me that the layout of the magic array was exquisite and grand. Zhu Yun could only destroy it but not understand it. Unless he could have a formation map, he would have to discover all the formation eyes before observing them. But when he came to the demon refining tower, his primary purpose was to find someone. If we are trying to understand this formation, we are putting the cart before the horse. Boom. As the scene shook more and more violently, the momentum also became alarming. Zhu Yun held a sword in his right hand and held several heaven-gathering thunder talismans with his left hand. Wu Nan and Wu Neng were back to back, observing the direction of the other two sides. Suddenly, the layers before my eyes were shattered, just like the mottled wall could no longer withstand the invasion of time and was peeling off layer by layer. Wu Nan immediately saw the two men and the beast, his pupils shrank, and he immediately released spiritual power on his sword, looking ready to attack. Huazi, there is someone. A familiar voice sounded, and Zhu Yun quickly turned around, feeling stunned. Huazi, big dog. Xiaozhu, why are you here? The three of them looked at each other. When Wu Nan saw this scene, he couldn't help but look relieved. It was obvious that these two people knew Zhu Yun. From the tone of his voice, they could not be enemies. Fellow Daoist Chen, do you know him? Wu Neng asked, looking at the two big dogs curiously. One has a broken hand, and the other is dressed in black. There is also a monster with a terrifying aura. The person who made Wu Nan nervous before was naturally Zhao Kamang. Zhu Yun looked helpless and said, it's a coincidence. Who would have thought that the place where we parted would be at the edge of this illusory formation? No wonder I didn't notice that I entered the formation. Is this a formation? Are you trapped in it? The big dog wondered. Zhu Yun nodded, and then said, but fortunately, no accident happened. By the way, these two are the people I am looking for, Wu Neng and Wu Nan. Chen Hua looked strange, incompetent. No difficulty. The Wu family's master and servant suddenly looked extremely embarrassed. Zhu Yun smiled and said, we will go together next. I plan to find an exit here and then send you out first. No. The two people from the Wu family said in unison, which made Zhu Yun's expression condense, and then he said, what, you all still want to stay here? Wu Neng said seriously, fellow Daoist Chen, we are here to kill monsters and obtain some materials in exchange for spiritual stones. Wu Nan said, I listened to the clan leader. As for Chen Hua, he said it didn't matter. Originally, he came here to accompany Li Molan. Now that Li Molan is dead, he just wants to send Li Molan's body back to Silver Sword Sect as soon as possible. As for De Go, he had previously agreed with Zhu Yun to return to Yunzhou. However, he just wanted to go back alone and didn't want Zhu Yun to delay his cultivation time because of him. Chen Yun ignored Wu Nang, but stared into Wu Nan's eyes and said, I forgot to tell you, I have already found out some information. This trip to the Demon Refining Tower is the conspiracy of the Lord of Naihuo City. They want to trap and kill him all the monks in the Foundation establishment stage here. No matter how many monsters you can kill if you stay here, what if you are discovered by the people from Backfire City? Hearing this, both of them were shocked. Wu Nan exclaimed, "This is too scary. Fellow Daoist Chen, are you trying to trick us out?" Wu Neng said with some yin and yang, "Fellow Daoist Chen, do you think we will hold you back?" Zhu Yun laughed dumbly and said, "I promised Mr. Lin that if you obey the arrangement, I will protect you as much as possible in the Demon Refining Tower. But obviously, the Demon Refining Tower at this time is not as simple as killing demons and obtaining materials. Come on. If you don't leave, then let's go our separate ways." This. Seeing Zhu Yun speaking so seriously, Wu Neng and Wu Nan didn't know how to answer the conversation. "The purpose of your coming here is to hunt monsters. But at this time, the Demon Refining Tower is really not suitable. Why don't you go to Shiwanda Mountain? At least the outside there is safe. 100,000 mountains. No, there are too many monsters there. I'm afraid the two of us can't do it." Wu Neng shook his head repeatedly and said. Zhu Yun smiled and said, "There are not many monsters outside the 100,000 mountains. Just go deep slowly and be careful." After thinking about it, he separated half of his armor talisman and handed it to them, saying, "The monsters outside are not strong. Before going to Naihuo City, I came out of Shiwanda Mountain. This talisman can block a full force attack during the foundation stage, which is a guarantee." Wu Nan took it, but then frowned and said, "Fellow Daoist Chen, at that time you said you only knew elementary talismans. These talismans are obviously not. Did you learn them from the talisman fragments that day? Fragments of the heavenly talisman?" De Go and Chen Hua looked at each other, feeling vaguely that these four words sounded familiar. But they didn't speak. Zhu Yun said seriously, "Anan, Wu Neng, you need to know why the Wu family was destroyed because of the broken talisman that day. So in the future, please don't mention it in front of outsiders." As he said that, he looked back at the two people beside him and said, "It's a good thing that they are on good terms with me, otherwise the broken scroll of the heavenly talisman will bring disaster to your life. From now on, these four words will be rotten in my heart in the belly." "Yes, yes, yes." Wu Nan was also surprised, and then he was thankful for Zhu Yun's reminder. After taking the talisman, he said to Wu Nan, "Clan leader, we should listen to fellow Daoist Chen. This demon refining tower is the conspiracy of the Lord of Naihuo City. Obviously Naihuo City has also. If we can't go back, why don't we hunt monsters in the Shiwen Mountains? In addition to obtaining materials, we can also improve our own strength. When the right time comes, we can revive our Wu family." Wu Nan didn't have much opinion, so he agreed after hearing what Wu Nan said. Zhu Yun then smiled and said, "In that case, let's find an exit." At this time, Big Dog came close to Zhu Yun and whispered, "Xiaozhu, when I leave the Demon Refining Tower, I will go back to Yunzhou by myself, so don't send me off." Zhu Yun was stunned and said, "You broke your arm, I'm afraid it's inappropriate." The Big Dog pretended to be relaxed and said, "I just go by sea, and I won't pass through Yezhu. What are you afraid of?" Zhu Yun sighed and said, "Let's put this matter aside for now. Whether we can find an exit on the first floor remains to be seen." "Okay then," Big Dog shrugged and said, "By the way, you used Chen Hua's name with them again." Zhu Yun said helplessly, "How did I know that I would meet you here? In the past, it was easy for people to guess my real name when I used Yunzhu. Then I thought about using Chen Hua, and I didn't use it twice before I met you." "What are you talking about?" When Chen Hua saw the two whispering, he couldn't help but ask curiously. The Big Dog grinned, "Xiao Bai, I'm talking to Chen Hua, kids, don't interrupt." Chen Hua glared at the Big Dog fiercely and said nothing. He knew that the Big Dog was reminding him that Zhu Yun used his own name in front of the Wu family. "Is this really true? Is my name so useful?" I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 344. Zuyun let the big dog ride on Zhao Kamang's back, while he led the way, leading everyone aimlessly. After mastering the void-breaking spiritual eye technique, Zuyun discovered that this technique was really useful. Although it is just a beginner, it is enough for the first level of the demon refining tower. At this time, he only thought, if he saw the beast tied in the illusory formation, why didn't he use the void-breaking spirit eye technique to take a look? Because of this, Zuyunke was running his spiritual power all the time, and his eyes were as sharp as an eagle. Moreover, the void-breaking spiritual eye technique does not consume much spiritual power, so it is no burden to Zuyun at all. I just don't know what will happen if I practice this technique to the second level. Will it be see-through? Zuyun couldn't help but think. At this time, in the land of Chinen, in front of a Niao's house, Meng Wei finished a bowl of fish soup and gently placed the bowl back on the simple table. A bird, I'm going to find a Wu. You wait for me here. A Niao was stunned and said, Fairy, why are you looking for a Wu? Meng Wei smiled sweetly and said, I have recovered from my injuries, and it's time to leave. But whether I will take you away and send you back to where you should go, I don't know yet. A flash of disappointment flashed in Niao's eyes. The time he spent with Meng Wei made him realize that the outside world was wonderful. Although Meng Wei has said countless times that danger is overshadowed by excitement, Niao didn't know why but wanted to go and have a look. He couldn't wait to leave Chinen, cross the volcanic belt, and go to Chubei to have a look. But he also knew that it was absolutely impossible based on his own ability. Meng Wei naturally saw the disappointment in Niao's eyes, so he didn't say much. It was not good to say too much at this time. To be honest, it was a little difficult for her to walk alone to find Zhu Feng. Not to mention taking a mortal with him. Although, a bird is not an ordinary mortal. Okay, just wait for me here. Even if I leave, I will leave tomorrow. After saying that, Meng Wei stood up and walked towards the village with light steps. The village was only 5 miles away. Meng Wei quickened his pace after a Niao lost sight of it. With a little movement of spiritual power, her speed suddenly increased. After arriving at the village, Meng Wei went straight to Ao's home. The door was open, and Ao was taking the pulse of a village woman. Meng Wei didn't want to disturb, but waited behind the door. Well, you are very ill. Awu's words frightened the village woman. You, don't scare me. I just have a stomachache. The village woman twitched her hand and looked panicked. Ao chuckled and said, Don't panic, I just said that the illness is not serious, I didn't say that it can't be saved. Then help me quickly. The village woman was surprised and happy. Awu touched the scruffy beard on his chin, pretending to be profound, and said, You have to prescribe the right medicine for the rescue. In this way, you ask your men to go to the beach to pick up some round stones, and then go to Damiao village to buy some of their specialty gold bugs, and also yes. Meng Wei was surprised when he heard this. Although he had never seen a doctor before, Ao's medical skills didn't sound like a serious mortal's medical skills. However, this matter had nothing to do with her. After Ao finished his instructions and the village woman was about to leave, she walked into the house. Ao. Meng Wei's red lips parted slightly, and Awu, who was picking at the table and packing the utensils, suddenly raised his head. After seeing that it was Meng Wei, his face couldn't help but change. He quickly put on a smile and said with a groveling look, Fairy, you are here. The village woman glanced at Meng Wei several times, then turned and walked out of the house. For her, medical treatment was more important. Of course she recognized Meng Wei. Such a beautiful woman, I will definitely not forget it after seeing her last time. After Meng Wei saw the village woman leaving, she casually sat down on a wooden stool and said softly, Awu, Where did you pick up the bird? She got straight to the point, no nonsense. Awu's expression condensed and he said, Fairy, are you leaving? A bird, I picked it up on the edge of Wanyeo Mountain, but... Just what? Fairy, do you want to hear a story? Awu took a deep breath and sat on his chair. Say it. Mengwei knew that the story Awu told must be related to a Niao, so he was not worried. This will determine the rest of her journey. Should he take a Niao with him, or should he leave her alone and go find Zhu Feng on his own? More than 20 years ago, I was a casual cultivator in Chubei. As soon as Awu opened her mouth, Mengwei's eyes narrowed. No wonder she could save him. At that time, I planned to go to the ruins of the 10,000 demon sect to find some treasures or some discarded materials. When I passed the outskirts of Shiwanda Mountain, I encountered a group of bird monsters, besieging a 5 or 6-year-old child. At that time, I didn't know what I was thinking, so I felt compassion and wanted to save the child. So I killed some of the monster birds and drove away some. But I also suffered some injuries, but they were not fatal. With my level, I can more than protect myself. However, I didn't dare to stay in Shiwanda Mountain anymore, so I thought there were still some houses in the 10,000 demons section. I can barely live in it. The child was in good spirits. He was besieged by monsters like this, but he only suffered some superficial injuries. I didn't know at the time that the child's injuries recovered very quickly, and I didn't take it seriously. So I took the child on the road, which was not far from the 10,000 demons section. About halfway there, the child suddenly became manic, and his spiritual power surged uncontrollably. Soon, what happened to me something I've never seen in my life. Having said this, Awu paused. Mengwei asked, did he become a bird? Awu nodded slowly, then smiled bitterly and said, yes, a Niao turned into a bird, and he was extremely crazy. I was surprised and thought about suppressing him. After all, in Chuzhu, people who practice 10,000 demons, there are countless examples of people turning into monsters instead of using the technique. It just so happened that my master had studied the 10,000 demons technique and created a technique, so I wanted to try it on him and turn him back into a human. After all, a child who was only 6 or 7 years old suddenly turned into a bird in front of me. I don't know why, I couldn't bear it. Mengwei blinked. It seems that your master's method has worked. Awu sighed, it's successful, but I also paid the price. After the bird was controlled by me, it didn't change back immediately. Instead, during the struggle, it pecked through my lower abdomen. Mengwei was shocked. So you lost all your spiritual power and became immortal? Awu nodded and said, that's right. At that time, all my thoughts were lost and my spiritual power was gone, which meant that I could no longer continue practicing in this life. I wanted to kill a Niao to vent my hatred, but I didn't expect that a Niao was here again. Then I regained my consciousness, and recited the mantra I had recited before, and returned to my human form. Looking at the innocent and blank eyes, my heart softened. Mengwei frowned. A Niao said that he didn't know where he came from, and when he was confused, he heard Awu continue, I asked A Niao some things, but I didn't know anything about them. Even I didn't know anything at all. I didn't get any response, but later I discovered that A Niao looked 6 or 7 years old, but his spiritual intelligence was not developed at all. And that's when I realized that a Niao was not a monk who failed to practice the 10,000 demons art. Besides, how could a 6 or 7-year-old child with no obvious talent choose this last path to immortality? Mengwei was convinced. She heard Zuyun talk about Zhao Kamang. Zhao Kamang's talent was very average and he was having a hard time in Chuzhu, so he practiced the 10,000 demons art. Moreover, the main reason why he runs the market is to obtain monsters from the sea monsters for him to cultivate. Later, by chance, After being controlled by Mu Kingzin using the puppet soul control technique, she could no longer suppress the demonic power in her body and turned into a demonic beast. But fortunately, he also retained his sanity because of the soul control pill. Then, why did a Niao turn into a monster? Meng Wei asked. Wu looked at the door in a daze. After a while, he said, after my spiritual power was gone, I wanted to go to the 10,000 demon sect to heal my wounds. After a Niao became a human again, he didn't have any strength in his body, so he took me with him. I followed him to the gate of Wanyeo sect, but I didn't expect that a bird was very resistant and even wanted to bite me. Wu pulled up his sleeve, and there was a deep tooth mark on it. It looked like it was indeed bitten by a child. She frowned. Wu put down his sleeves again and said, I am in great pain, and I still don't know why. I am completely powerless, and I couldn't stand still, so I rolled down the mountain road. When I landed at the bottom of the mountain, a Niao also let go just when I wanted to go up the mountain. The bird bit me again, but I stopped and the bird stopped biting me. Only then did I realize that although the bird had no intelligence, it instinctively resisted going up the mountain. Meng Wei asked curiously, what's on the 10,000 monsters mountain? Wu looked at Meng Wei meaningfully and uttered 3 words, Demon Refining Tower. Meng Wei's expression changed, he stood up suddenly, and said in shock, Wu, you mean, a Niao came out of the Demon Refining Tower? I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 345. As the young palace master of a major demon sect in Yezhou, Meng Wei certainly knew about the Demon Refining Tower. In fact, the Demon Refining Tower is more famous than the 10,000 Demon Sect. After all, the 10,000 Demon Sect has been destroyed long ago, but the Demon Refining Tower has survived forever. However, Meng Wei had been suppressed by the Yunzhou Lingjian sect for 500 years, and had not had much interaction with Chezhou before, so for a while, he did not think of the Demon Refining Tower and the 10,000 Demon Sect. But when she heard it, she was extremely horrified. The Demon Refining Tower is one of the forbidden areas in Chezhou. Not to mention him, anyone in Yezhou who has reached the realm of the Dan formation stage knows that Chezhou Demon Refining Tower is a place that is not allowed to enter without permission. Even if someone wants to obtain some demonic beast materials, they would rather travel more than 10,000 miles to go to the 100,000 mountains. The reason for this is because it is said that there is no return to the Demon Refining Tower. But after hearing Wu's words, a Niao broke out of the Demon Refining Tower. She couldn't believe it, but listening to what a Niao said in his own words, he would indeed turn into a bird monster without control. After going crazy for a while, he would regain his consciousness, and then use the formula taught by the witch to become a human being again. The first reaction in Meng Wei's mind was that a Niao was a monster in the transformation stage, otherwise how could it be transformed into a human form? But the strange thing is that a Niao obviously doesn't have any spiritual power. Wait, how could a monster have spiritual power? Meng Wei's eyes suddenly lit up. Maybe the monsters in the Demon Refining Tower are different? Fairy, when a Niao was a child, he resisted returning to the Demon Refining Tower. But after all, he is a demon. If he stays here for a long time, I am afraid of an accident. If possible, I hope you can take him to the Demon Refining Tower. Take a walk in the Demon Tower, of course, it still depends on your own wishes. After Wu finished speaking, he closed his eyes, not daring to look at Meng Wei anymore. Because he knew that this was a bit difficult. Although his spiritual power is no longer there, it can be guessed that Meng Wei's realm will not exceed the foundation building stage. How could a monk who drowned in the sea be in the foundation building stage? Meng Wei smiled bitterly and said, Wu, I can take a Niao to the Demon Refining Tower, but how will he survive after entering the Demon Refining Tower? Instead of being a demon, it is better to let him be ignorant. Human race. At least, after turning into a demon, he can change back. Who knows what will happen? There was one thing she didn't say, even she didn't dare to enter the demon refining tower. When it comes to life and death, she has taken a dim view. But this is only for Zuyun. She gave up life and death for Zuyun, but Aniao was still a stranger after all. Although he saved her life, there are still differences between people. Awu sighed and said, "Fairy, you can do whatever you want. I just said it casually. After all, for so many years, I can't ask anyone else." What he said was reasonable. No monk could stay here for a moment longer in this kind of mortal village. The village chief had lost contact with him since he was young. For monks, dealing too much with mortals is just a waste of time. If you have this skill, you might as well practice for an extra week, which is better than nothing. Awu, forgive me for being helpless, but I think it would be better for a Niao to stay here. Maybe there will be another chance in the future. Mengwei had given up the idea of taking a Niao away. One is because the demon refining tower is a taboo-like existence. The other is that he is not strong enough. If I could go back to the pill-forming stage, thinking that Aniao saved my life, it wouldn't hurt to take a trip. But at this time, I can't protect myself, and my life is running out. Mengwei is a person who enjoys grudges, but naturally she won't do anything she can't do. Clang. At this time, there was a sudden sound outside the door, and Ao and Mengwei looked outside the house at the same time. But who would have thought that the demonic power suddenly surged everywhere, and the huge demonic power invaded instantly? There is a monster. Mengwei was startled, and quickly squeezed a magic formula in her hand. The warm earth fire in her dantian quickly jumped into her delicate palm. "Fairy, show mercy." Awu screamed, but there was no sound again. It turned out that this demonic aura suppressed him to death, and his mortal body could not resist it at all. Mengwei gathered his spiritual power and flicked his left hand back, forming a fiery red spiritual shield in front of Awu, blocking most of the demonic power. Awu finally took a breath and said hurriedly, "Fairy, it's a Niao, it's a Niao." His tone was very urgent, while Mengwei was stunned. "A bird." But she soon came back to her senses. It must have been that Aniao had followed her, but her realm had fallen and she had no spiritual awareness. She didn't know that Aniao was hiding outside the house and eavesdropping. At this time, another whistling sound came, and the demonic power weakened instantly. Mengwei was startled and rushed out of the house. A huge golden bird flapped its wings and flew straight into the sky. On the dirt road in the village, some villagers who were alarmed and came out to watch the excitement had a look of fear on their faces. Someone shouted in horror, "A bird has turned into a bird." Someone else said, "A bird has turned into a demon." Someone retorted, "A bird is a human, how could he become a demon? Could it be that he is a human demon?" Mengwei stared blankly at Aniao walking away at an extremely fast speed. At that moment, she was a little distracted. "Fairy, now, it's time for bird to go." Awu's voice sounded from behind Mengwei, with a sighing tone. Mengwei understood what he meant, because Aniao had told him that if the villagers saw him turn into a bird, they would be frightened. And now, with so many people seeing it with their own eyes, Aniao would have no chance of staying in this village. Even if he wanted to stay, the villagers would definitely move away. "Oh, I can't guarantee that I can take him to the demon refining tower," Mengwei said softly. "Alas, all this is destined by heaven." Ao sighed and sat back in his house. Mengwei watched Aniao leave, and then said to Awu, "Ao, I'm leaving first, see you later." After that, she walked onto the dirt road. The villagers were still talking about it, as if Aniao's transformation into a monster had no effect on them at all. But Mengwei was not a nosy person. All the way back to Aniao's home, seeing the simple wooden house was empty, Mengwei felt like something was missing. But soon, she laughed at herself again. Menguia, Menguia, you are a witch of Yalogo sect, how come you become so sentimental? Aniao has left, and you should leave tomorrow too. Liwo sect, outside the mountain gate. Zhu Feng disguised himself, changed out of his black clothes, and put on ordinary mortal clothes instead. This was what he robbed in the sea. It's not that he doesn't want to wear a protective robe, but he hasn't met any children of his age in the sea who have embarked on the immortal path. Naturally, there are only clothes made of ordinary fabrics. Little kid, the gate of Wanjian Mountain is a key place, you can't enter it at will. The two foundation building stage saw Zhu Feng walking straight towards the side, and couldn't help but shout in a deep voice. Wanjian Mountain? Zhu Feng is not unfamiliar with this name. When he followed Zhou Ruyu to practice sword, he heard her yearning for Wanjian Mountain a lot. It is said that the entire Lingjian sect is proud to enter Wanjian Mountain. Wanjian Mountain is the main sect of Yeazhu, and Yeazhu is the center of Yeajing. He also told Zhou Ruyu that he also wanted to go to Wanjian Mountain. But isn't this Zhezhu? One of the foundation building period saw Zhu Feng stunned, and thought he was scared by him, and laughed strangely. Little kid, you'd better go back to Suckle. How can you come to the important place of the immortal sect? Zhu Feng came back to his senses, and a trace of murderous intent flashed in his heart. Now he just wants to be a casual cultivator. Entering the sect is just to make it easier for him to kill people. With a turn of his eyes, Zhu Feng shouted in a low voice, and then took out an ordinary low-grade spiritual sword from the storage bag, saying, "Two seniors, I came from the sea across the ocean just to learn swordsmanship from the immortal sect." The two didn't pay attention at first, but when they saw Zhu Yun releasing his spiritual power to show his realm, and he was carrying a storage bag, they couldn't help but be shocked. Looking again, the good boy turned out to be the 12th level of Qi refining. This is only one step away from the foundation building stage. One of them hurriedly asked, "Little boy, how old are you this year?" Zhu Feng observed the expressions of the two people and knew that he had shocked them. He couldn't help but straighten his chest and said, "Senior, I am 11 years old this year. I was originally just a casual cultivator in the sea. But recently I have always felt that I have encountered a bottleneck and cannot break through, so I came ashore and wanted to enter the immortal gate to practice." The two looked at each other, and one of them said, "This kid, at the age of 11, has reached the 12th level of Qi refining. This is a genius among geniuses." "Yes," the other person also said, "isn't the sect looking for geniuses? If we accept him into the sect, I believe we can also make a great contribution, and maybe we can even compete for some resources for cultivation." After the two of them discussed it, one of them quickly rushed to the sect. Not long after, a Jindan stage flew out and then landed in front of Zhu Feng. He looked up and down and found that Zhu Feng's bones were indeed only 11 years old. He was very surprised and excited. Wanjian Mountain hasn't met such a genius for a long time. After a closer look, he saw Zhu Feng holding the spirit sword, so he put away his expression and asked, "Little kid, do you want to join my Wanjian Mountain?" "Senior, I have traveled a long way, and this is the first immortal gate I encountered. I think I have a connection with the sect. And I heard from the two seniors in the foundation building period that the sect is called Wanjian Mountain. It just so happens that I also use swords. This can be said to be the will of heaven. It is my blessing to join Wanjian Mountain." "Ha ha ha," Xianxia raised his head and laughed, saying, "What a clever little kid, come on, come and use the sword for this elder to see. If you use the sword well, this elder can accept you as a disciple. My swordsmanship is crude, please forgive me, senior." Zhu Feng only knows the sword control tactics of the Lingjian sect, and he has been practicing since he was a child, so he is naturally very skilled. As for Xianxia, he didn't care about the level of the sword technique, but the understanding of the sword. Zhu Feng danced the sword technique with great vigor and skill, and Xianxia nodded frequently. Although he could see many obvious flaws, these flaws were due to the low level of the technique. For a kid who was only 11 years old, he was already a rare talent in 1,000 years. After Zhu Feng finished dancing, Xianxia was very satisfied and said, "Good disciple, come and meet the master." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 346. Zhu Feng was extremely happy. He had been in the sea for 3 years and killed people for 3 years. But most of them were mortals. What he said to the 2 guards was true and false. The real thing was that he had encountered a bottleneck and could not break through. It was because the 12th level of Qi refining was a hurdle. Admittedly, because of his magic skills, he could continue to practice and break through to the foundation building stage without the foundation building pill. But the power required was extremely huge. With him in the sea, even if he devoured tens of thousands of mortals, it would not necessarily loosen the bottleneck. Even 10 or 8 years would not be possible. He was still thinking about seeking revenge on Zhu Yun and Sun Qiniang. He could not wait for such a slow progress. And now, being able to enter Wanjian Mountain also indicated that Zhu Feng would be surrounded by cultivators in the future. Maybe, just absorbing the spiritual power of 10 foundation building stages is enough. Disciple Zhu Feng, meet the master. May I know the master's name? Not bad, not bad, Xianxia was very satisfied. Although Zhu Feng looked young, he was not like those kids he had met before. He stroked his beard and smiled. The master is the 2nd elder in the sect, so the name is Xianxia. Do you remember? Disciple remembers, the master's name is Xianxia, the 2nd elder of Wanjian Mountain. Zhu Feng said loudly. Very good. Xianxia reached out and took out a pill from the storage bag, threw it over, and said, "This is the foundation building pill." Happiness came too suddenly. Zhu Feng didn't expect that he tried everything to break through the foundation building stage, but he didn't expect to get a foundation building pill so easily. This saves a lot of time. One step closer to revenge. Zhu Feng quickly put it away, knelt on the ground again, kowtowed 3 times in a row, and then said, "Disciple thanks master for the reward. Get up, follow me in, go and look for a cave you like. Whichever one you like, master will let you live in. In addition, master will also give you a sword technique. Don't practice the ordinary sword technique you used to practice, so as not to lose the reputation of our Wanjian Mountain." "Yes, master." Zhu Feng stood up happily, not because of the sword technique, after all, he practiced magic. But with the sword technique as a pretext, he can invite some weak foundation building period people to the cave in the name of asking for advice, and then kill them and devour their spiritual power. It's simply wonderful. You too have helped the sect to recruit disciples, so this elder will personally reward you with some pills. Xianxia was in a very good mood. He threw a bottle of pills to each of them, and then continued, "If anyone else comes to pay respect to the mountain gate, remember to inform this elder first. Wanjian Mountain is now at war with Xian City, and it is time to use people." "Yes, 2nd elder." The 2 were also very happy. You know, it is extremely difficult to practice now. In addition to the lack of time, there is also a lack of resources. In recent days, the sect has continuously transferred many people to Xian City thousands of miles away. Now, Xianxia is the only one left in the Jindan stage to preside over the overall situation. In addition, the cultivators in the middle and late stages of foundation building have also been taken away. You know, the cultivators in these realms are all genius elites in the entire Yazhu. God knows when it will be their turn. Only by practicing more can you improve your strength. The stronger your strength, the more chance you will have in the Battle of Xian City. Zhu Feng followed Jian all the way. Jian talked about some rules of Wanjian Mountain and kept his word, leading him from cave to cave. Zhu Feng was calculating in his mind, and naturally he would find the most remote location from the main hall of the sect. Okay, this is the most remote place. There are only a few dozen caves that can be lived in. Can you choose? Jian also stopped when he reached the cave that originally belonged to Li Yan. That's it, master. I don't like to be disturbed when I am practicing. Zhu Feng said hurriedly. Indeed, you are now in the 12th level of Qi refining, and you may break through the foundation establishment stage at any time. Good disciple, that's it? Jian looked at Zhu Feng with appreciation, and whispered to the cave, everyone inside, come out. After 3 breaths, a group of cultivators in the early stage of foundation establishment rushed out. Meet the second elder. Yes, Jian responded indifferently, and then said, this cave will belong to my disciple in the future. You can find another cave. Everyone was shocked. Jian was one of the important figures in the section who didn't know him. Especially in the recent period, he was the only one in the Jindan stage here, but no one had ever heard that he had a disciple. Looking at Zhu Feng carefully, his face was young, and he was only at the 12th level of Qi refining, and he immediately understood. They were all elite disciples from the major sects in Yezhu, with amazing eyesight. They guessed that Zhu Feng must be Jian new disciple, so they all wanted to make friends with him. So it's the new junior brother. Junior brother is at the 12th level of Qi refining at such a young age. Junior brother, if there is anything you don't understand in the future, let's get closer. A group of people flattered him one after another, but they didn't dare to say too much. They each said a sentence, bowed to Jian and then left. This scene was kept in Zhu Feng's heart, and he was even more surprised and happy. He was afraid that since he had just arrived, no one would take him seriously. He was also thinking about how to trick people into coming over by promising them benefits. Now it seems that all he needs to do is raise his arms and fear that these fellow disciples will swarm him. Disciple, looking at your happy look, it seems that you are very satisfied with this cave. Jian said with a smile. The most satisfying thing for King Han is to become a disciple of Master. Zhu Feng said with a smile. Ha ha ha. My little boy, I don't like flattering others, but I don't know why. Your words make me feel very comfortable. Come on, come into the cave, I will give you the best of 10,000 swords mountain. Swordsmanship, wait until you become proficient in swordsmanship before swallowing the foundation establishment pill. Yes, master. Zhu Feng followed Jian into the cave. Jian didn't put on any airs. He first took out a sword manual and threw it over, then slowed down and demonstrated it himself. Finally, he gave a few more instructions and then withdrew with a look of satisfaction. Zhu Feng was the only one left in the cave. I still need to practice magic skills. I am most afraid of someone coming suddenly. If I am discovered by others, my efforts will be in vain. Those who previously pleased me during the foundation building period may also come here to make friends with me. It just so happens that I have learned the 9 turns 9. There are several changes to the Yang formation, let's arrange them now. Zhu Feng took out 9 spiritual stones, stood there and concentrated for more than 10 breaths, and then threw them out one by one. He didn't know that he had been watched since he entered the cave. That's right, it's Sun Suanhua. At first, Sun Suanhua was overjoyed. After leaving a group of people in the foundation building stage, a little kid at the 12th level of Qi refining came. He has also heard about what happened in Wanjian Mountain recently. The foundation building early stagers who used to live here often discussed the affairs of Scarlet Flame City, letting Sun Suanhua know that there was only one pill building stage in the sect. Even apart from the Dan formation stage, the highest realm is only the foundation establishment stage. If so, he could give it a try. Who would have thought that another chi refining period would come, which made him immediately decide to escape today. Xianxia's instructions also reached his ears. Sun Suanhua knew that Xianxia would not be coming here in a short time, which greatly increased his confidence. Only when Zhu Feng used extremely unfamiliar techniques to set up his original 9 turns and 9 suns formation, Sun Suanhua was stunned. The only one he personally taught about the 9 turn 9 yang formation was Zhu Yun. Could it be that this kid was Zhu Yun's disciple? It's impossible. How could Zhu Yun's apprentice join Wanjian Mountain? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Sun Suanhua shook his head repeatedly, recalling in his mind, and finally remembered that when he fled from Yaezhu to Yunzhou, he lost the formation map of the 9 turns and 9 suns formation. Got picked up by this kid. Sun Suanhua frowned and resisted the urge to rush out and ask. Let's talk about it later. Now that Wanjianshan has started to accept disciples, it means that there are not enough manpower. After all, we have been hiding here for so long, so it won't be short of just a while and a half. After thinking about it for a long time, Sun Suanhua decided to figure out the way for this little kid. Anyway, no one can find him hiding here, and he is happy to be quiet. After Zhu Feng set up the 9 turns and 9 suns formation, he took out his spiritual sword and started practicing new sword techniques with the sword manual. In fact, his talent is very average, and his rapid progress is all due to his magic skills. And his sword practice was just so that he could easily deceive people when the time came. But in Sun Suanhua's view, this kid practiced his sword over and over again without stopping at all. Coupled with the similarity with Zhu Yun, he couldn't help but think of Zhu Yun. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 347. To say that the two people who impressed Sun Suanhua the most are actually just two. One is his son, now the 19th sword of Wanjianshan. Back then, they chased him all the way from Yaezhu to Yunzhou. The other one is Zhu Yun. He had not been with Zhu Yun for long at all, but it occupied an extremely important position in his mind. When Sun Suanhua saw Zhu Feng, his mind was filled with the shadow of Zhu Yun. The more he looked at it, the more he looked like it, and he couldn't calm down at all. He originally thought that Zhu Feng might be Zhu Yun's son. But after calculating the time, it doesn't seem to match up. When he and Zhu Yun separated, Zhu Yun was only more than 10 years old. Moreover, he knew that Zhu Yun devoted himself to cultivation, and he heard some resentment from Meng Wei's mouth. He also knew that Zhu Yun was simply a wooden person when it came to matters between men and women. How could such a person have a Taoist companion willing to bear a child for him? So, this guy is Zhu Yun's brother? Sun Suanhua hesitated for a long time, and finally when Zhu Feng was tired from practicing his sword and was about to take a rest, he walked out of his formation. Little baby, what's your name? An unfamiliar voice suddenly sounded in the extremely quiet cave, and Zhu Feng couldn't help being startled. He quickly jumped around with his sword in hand and subconsciously performed the first form of the sword control technique, releasing his sword energy. Sun Suanhua was stunned for a moment, but he was even more certain in his heart. He couldn't help laughing and said, "Little boy, who are you, Zhu Yun?" He doesn't know how to use swords, but after staying in the spirit sword sect for hundreds of years, how could he not recognize the sword control techniques of the spirit sword sect? Zhu Feng was extremely surprised when he suddenly heard Zhu Yun's name from Sun Suanhua's mouth, but when he saw Sun Suanhua's kindness on his face, his heart moved. Could it be that this was Zhu Yun's old friend? Immediately, he pretended to be careful and said, "Zhu Yun is my brother, who are you? Is it your brother?" Sun Suanhua had already guessed that the two must be related. Now that he got confirmation from Zhu Feng, he was naturally in a good mood. "Ha ha ha, yes, yes. I said, how come you have his shadow in your boy? Boy, I am your brother's master. Is it not too much for you to call me master? In terms of talent in cultivation, Sun Suanhua looked down upon Zhu Feng. But Ai Wu Ji Wu, and because Zhu Feng set up the 9 turns and 9 suns formation, made him love him very much. As long as I, Sun Suanhua, am happy to accept a disciple or something like that. But Zhu Feng got another meaning from it. In other words, he will not be on guard against himself at all. If possible. Thinking of this, Zhu Feng quickly knelt down on the ground, just like he knelt before Jian outside the Luo sect, kowtowing for a while. Disciple Zhu Feng, I have met master. Well. Sun Suanhua was overjoyed and said, get up. I see you have learned the 9 turns and 9 suns formation. It means we are destined. With that said, he walked to the front of the formation and made a few formation techniques, but quickly controlled the formation. Zhu Feng was stunned as he watched on the side. He actually had such a method. Seeing Zhu Feng's surprise, Sun Suanhua was extremely proud and said, little Zhu Feng, Zhu Yun taught you this 9 turns and 9 suns formation, right? That brat didn't even know how many levels of skills he had learned, and he still dared to teach you. Come here, I'll teach you what's so mysterious about this formation. He had preconceptions that Zhu Feng's skills were learned from Zhu Yun, and he also felt that Zhu Yun's ability to teach people was too poor. Little did he know that Zhu Feng had figured out all of this by following Tang Zhuyang's formation diagram. But who is Tang Zhuyang? That was a member of the Tang family, a family of formations. When he picked up the formation map, Tang Zhuyang was already in the elixir formation stage. Coupled with nearly 100 years of research and no shortage of spiritual stones, it is naturally beyond the reach of a young boy like Zhu Feng. Zhu Feng didn't take it seriously at first, but when he listened to Sun Suanhua changing the formations and explaining them to him, some things he didn't understand suddenly became enlightened and he gained a lot. Originally, he had only mastered a dozen variations of this formation at most, and they were still the most common variations. But Sun Suanhua not only explained all the 81 changes, but also explained some combinations of changes. For example, Zhu Yun's most commonly used methods of trapping people and attacking. Before the demon refining tower, Zhu Yun first trapped those in the foundation building stage with trapped people, and then turned into an attack formation, allowing the spiritual power in the 9 spiritual stones to condense into 9 round suns that fell head-on, extremely powerful. Big. What Sun Suanhua was talking about at this time was that this kind of change would make one almost invincible when encountering the same realm. Zhu Feng quickly became immersed in it, completely forgetting his original intention to kill Sun Suanhua. If you kill him, you can only gain 1 foundation building period of spiritual power. But if you learn his formation, you can kill more people in the foundation building period in the future. Zhu Feng maintained this thought and listened to Sun Suanhua explain all his experiences. Master, this 9 turn 9 yang formation is really amazing. Zhu Feng's eyes shone brightly and he sighed repeatedly. That's right, this formation was created by my master's hard work. Among the entire Yaojing Gui, you should be considered the 3rd one. Sun Suanhua was very pleased with it and said proudly. I see. Zhu Feng was even more surprised and planned to learn more skills from Sun Suanhua. Since he is Zhu Yun's master, if he learns his methods, he will definitely be surprised by Zhu Yun. Thinking of this, Zhu Feng felt extremely happy and could imagine how Zhu Yun would react. Little baby, why did you come to Chuzhu and join Wanjian Mountain? Sun Suanhua also said he was tired, so he sat down casually. The 9 turn 9 yang formation allowed him to be used as a guard again. As long as someone approaches, he can quickly hide back in his formation. It's a long story. Zhu Feng quickly prepared his words in his mind and said, Master, you don't know something. My brother went to Yaezhu and left me to practice alone in the Lingjian section. Who knew that the Lingjian sect suddenly appeared? I ran away in a hurry after reaching the foundation stage. I originally wanted to go to Yeazhu to find my brother, but he had already reached the foundation stage, and it was thousands of miles away from Yunzhou, let alone Yeazhu. Big, I didn't know where to look for it, so after thinking about it, I decided to go to the sea to practice, but I didn't know that I would end up in Chuzhu. Did you come from the sea? Sun Suanhua looked strange. Yes, Wanjian Mountain sent people to destroy Lingjian section. How could I dare to go to Yeazhu? It's a coincidence that I didn't know that this place was the gate of Wanjian Mountain. When I found out, it was already too late. I can join in. Who knew that Elder Jian of my realm is very optimistic about me? Master, you should have seen it in your own formation, right? Thinking that he had been in the foundation establishment stage for hundreds of years and that the disciples he taught were also in the foundation establishment stage, Sun Suanhua had mixed feelings in his heart, curled his lips and said, I see, good boy, you two brothers are like monsters. A 5-spirit gen, you can actually cultivate to the foundation building stage, and you are so young, you are actually at the 12th level of Qi refining. Zhu Feng felt proud, but his expression remained unchanged. He had killed many people and he had long been accustomed to pretending to be his true mood. Pretending to be embarrassed, he touched his head and said, Master, I'm still far behind my brother. He has so many skills. I've always wanted to surpass him. Sun Suanhua was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, I'm afraid you don't know. It's easy to surpass your brother's level. After all, he has 5 spiritual roots and his cultivation is slow. But if you want to beat him, it's a bit difficult. That boy, he is very good at drawing talismans. If he hits you with a talisman, you may not be able to escape. Charms. Zhu Feng knew that Zhu Yun could draw talismans, but he couldn't help but be surprised when he heard these words from Sun Suanhua. That's right, Sun Suanhua chuckled and said, I forgot to introduce myself. My surname is Ye and my first name is Suanhua as a teacher. But when you go out to hang out, you must use a fake name, so when you are a teacher outside, you call yourself Sun Suanhua. I wish the wind would choke. It seems that he has always been called Zhu Feng. It seems that I will have to change my name in the future. In addition, my teacher is from the 7-star sect in Yeazhu, and he is the current head of the 7-star sect. Have you ever heard of the 7-star sect? Zhu Feng was naming himself and shook his head in confusion. Sun Suanhua suddenly felt a little discouraged and muttered, this kid Zhu Yun doesn't even brag about his ability as a teacher. He is really disrespectful. After straightening his expression, Sun Suanhua continued, the 7-star sect that I serve as a master is good at 7 skills, namely talismans, alchemy, weapon refining, formation, body skills, brewing wine and planting elixirs. As he spoke, Sun Suanhua couldn't help but recall the past, as if Zhu Yun was still in front of him. Chunan. Meng Wei sat there until dawn. She walked out of a Niao's wooden house, looked up at the fish belly white appearing in the east, and murmured, it's time for me to leave too. After saying that, she recited the formula. As her speaking speed became faster and faster, the spiritual power in her body gradually began to flow, and a strange yet familiar feeling filled her whole body. Sudden. She flicked her sleeves, and several flames flew out of them. After turning half a circle in front of him, he quickly rushed towards me. Soon, Meng Wei's whole body was wrapped in flames, but surprisingly, these flames did not hurt Meng Wei at all. This technique used to be driven by magic power. Now that I have practiced the spiritual fire symbiosis technique and the external fire technique, it's a completely different situation. As she finished speaking, Meng Wei's figure gradually shrank. By the time the flames dissipated, she had turned into a little girl of more than 10 years old. If I hadn't gone to find Zhu Feng, I wouldn't want to change back. These clothes have become looser. Meng Wei touched left and right, very unaccustomed to it. Especially when she felt some air leaking from her chest, she knew that her underwear had collapsed. At the same time, she discovered that her hair had also turned fiery red. Maybe it's because of the use of fire? She thought. He went back into the house and dug out a set of clothes he was wearing at that time from the corner of his storage bag. After changing, they all walked outside the house. As soon as he pushed the door open, he saw a figure falling from the sky. There was only a bang, and the figure stood firmly in front of her. A young man with a cold face, showing his strong arms, said coldly, "Little girl, why are you in my home?" Mengwe was startled for a moment, then smiled sweetly, "Aniao, have you changed back?" The person coming is none other than a bird, who has transformed back into a human form. "Who are you and how do you know?" Aniao's pupils shrank suddenly. After flying outside all night and being blown by the cold wind, he finally figured it out. But when he saw a strange girl knowing his true identity, he could no longer pretend to be cold. "I." Mengwe tilted his head, and having a funny idea, he smiled and said, "I drank your blood and you forgot. But the strange thing is that I had a stomachache yesterday, and when I woke up, I turned into a little girl." At once, Aniao was dumbfounded. After a while, he suddenly transformed into a golden bird and spoke in human language, "Fairy, I'll take you to Awu to see." Now, it was Mengwe's turn to look at Aniao with a dull face. Isn't it said that Aniao is uncontrollable when he turns into a bird? But at this time, he can not only transform himself, but also speak human language. What is this? Birdman. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 348. Aniao was worried about Mengwe getting into trouble. His own blood had a very powerful effect and was used by Awu to treat people more than once. But turning Mengwe into a little girl made him control his body and turn into a bird in a hurry. Mengwe opened his mouth, and she was just joking. Unexpectedly, Aniao took it seriously. However, this was the first time she saw Aniao's form at such a close distance. Thick wings, plump feathers, sharp claws, and the majestic demonic power on his body. No matter from which aspect, this is a powerful demon beast. Could it be that he is the big demon in the demon refining tower? Mengwe stood there in a daze, but Aniao was anxious and said, "Fairy, come on my back quickly, I fly fast." It seemed that he didn't know that his sudden change at this time had shocked Mengwe. Mengwe came back to his senses, shook his head, and said, "Aniao, where did you go yesterday?" Aniao was stunned and said, "Yesterday I..." He tried hard to recall, but found that his memory was very vague, and he stood there in a daze. Mengwe sighed and said, "Aniao, I'm fine. I became like this by myself. You can also change back to a human. Didn't you say that you became like this after drinking my blood? How come you are fine?" Aniao couldn't understand why Mengwe changed from a big girl to a little girl. Mengwe chuckled and said, "You can change from a human to a bird, why can't I change from an adult to a child? Okay, you change back, I think I can take you away." The reason she didn't want to take Aniao away was that she couldn't take good care of Aniao. But now it seems that if she encounters danger, Aniao can turn into a bird and run away. Maybe, she can even run away with me. In this way, Aniao would not only not become a burden, but more likely to be her helper. The demon refining tower is far away. If she walks there by herself, it is unknown when she will arrive. Take me away. Are you going to take me to my birthplace? Aniao was delighted, and at the same time, the demonic power flowed through his body. After a moment, he turned into the original strong young man. "Well, Awu told me where he picked you up from. I have to go find Zhu Feng. If I find him and nothing happens, I can go with you and send you back. Mengwei did not have a clear purpose. She came to Chuzhu just to strengthen the earth fire. Chuzhu is so big, where can't she go? Really? Aniao was overjoyed when he heard it. Fairy, wait a moment. After that, he rushed into the house and fiddled with it. Mengwei looked curiously and found that Aniao was packing her luggage. She immediately laughed and said, Aniao, tell me what you need and I can put it in the storage bag. She patted her waist, walked into the house, and put away the things Aniao had packed. Aniao's eyes widened immediately and said, Fairy, you have such a skill. If I go fishing at sea and stay for a few months, I will definitely return with a full load. Mengwei just found it funny and said, living creatures cannot survive in storage bags. They can only hold dead things. Also, now that you have this skill, do you still need to go fishing? Aniao showed an honest smile, touched the back of his head, and then found some things, which Mengwei put away. After half an hour, Aniao and Mengwei set off on their journey. Fairy, Zhu Feng must have gone 3,000 miles away. How about I take you flying? Aniao was very excited and looked around. It was not the first time for him to go north, but his mood this time was completely different from before. Do you know why I want to become a little girl? Mengwei asked back. Aniao was puzzled and shook his head. Mengwei said seriously, Aniao, it is inevitable to encounter some situations when going north, so it is relatively safer to disguise. Just imagine, if you see a little girl sitting on a big bird, will you be curious? Aniao suddenly realized and said, showing off in the city will attract trouble. That's right, Mengwei turned his head and said, remember, when you go out, it is better to talk less, because too much talk will lead to mistakes. You must listen to my command. If you encounter danger, you will turn into a bird and escape by yourself, don't worry about me. Why? Aniao said anxiously, Fairy, take me home, how can I ignore you? Mengwei sighed and said, I mean, encounter the worst situation. If even I am in danger, can you still save me? In short, if you listen, I will take you. If you don't listen, we will say goodbye. Hearing Mengwei's heavier tone, Aniao lowered his head a little unhappy, but he was a little unconvinced in his heart. You know, at this time, he still had the thoughts and vision of Immortal, and always thought that he could fly, which was an amazing ability. Little did he know that a young cultivator in the 6th level of Qi refining could also fly with a flying device. Mengwei saw it, but did not say much. He had said so much, so he could listen or not. Of course, what she said was the worst-case scenario. In Chuzhu, no one would recognize her at this time. But it would take a long time to walk 3,000 miles away. But Mengwei was not in a hurry, she wanted to slowly teach Aniao something. At this time, in the demon refining tower, the group of 5 people did not encounter any monsters. This made Zuyun wonder if the news about the demon refining tower spread by the outside world was false. And even if there were demon beasts, did someone come in and see the demon beasts caused by this illusion? It is unknown. The demon refining tower is too mysterious. In recent days, not to mention encountering demon beasts, even people have not been encountered. Wu Nan couldn't help but feel a little irritated. Wu Nan said, fellow Daoist Chen, could it be that these demon beasts and monks were taken away by the lord of Naihuo city? Zuyun had thought of this possibility, but as far as he knew, apart from knowing that the lord of Naihuo city had a conspiracy, he knew nothing else. He shook his head and said, let's take it one step at a time. Whether we take them or not is none of our business. Our goal now is just to find an exit. When we find the exit, it will be the day to go our separate ways. But right now, there is no clue at all. Zuyun wanted to summon Sango as well and use his nose to find the demon beasts. But then he thought again, he hadn't smelled the illusion of the monster in the illusion array, so it would be futile to let him come out. As for finding someone, Zuyun didn't want to run into other cultivators at all, it would just cause trouble. But in fact, he felt that he had wasted a lot of time at this time. He was very anxious even if he said he was not in a hurry. He just wanted to be alone as soon as possible, hide in the Dao glass mirror, break through to the Jindan stage peacefully, and then go to save Sun Suanhua. But the problem is that he must do what he promised others. Just when he was a little upset, the ground suddenly began to shake. Everyone was startled and stopped in a hurry. There was nothing unusual in sight, which meant that the place where the abnormal movement came from was far away from them. Not being able to see it was enough to show how huge the momentum of the epicenter was. Zuyun's eyes narrowed, and he said, "A cultivator can't make such a noise, could it be a beast tide?" "It's possible, but I don't know if we are in an illusion array." The big dog rolled off Zhao Kamang's back, walked to Zuyun and said. Chen Hua thought for a moment, and then said, "How about I go and take a look? He is good at the tricky sword, using the tricky sword steps, and his ability to hide is one of the best among the crowd." Zuyun shook his head and said, "If it is really a beast tide, your tricky sword steps will not be of any use. Let me go, and you stay where you are." Chen Hua wanted to say something, but Zuyun had already rushed forward. After an incense stick, he saw a mountain standing. He couldn't help but stop again. Originally, the first floor of the demon refining tower was a flat land. Even if it was far away, it should be visible. But at this time, the mountain suddenly appeared in front of him. After thinking for a while, Zuyun used the breaking void spirit eye technique again. The mountain was still there. Isn't it an illusion, or is it too far away, beyond the distance of the breaking void spirit eye technique? Zuyun was worried, holding the spirit sword in one hand and pinching a Fujushin Leifu in the other hand, and then walked forward carefully. The distance of the mountain was still a little far, but the monster tower was weird and inexplicable, so he had to be careful. The ground was still shaking. As he got closer, the ground was shaking more and more strongly. But when he walked to the bottom of the mountain, he didn't encounter any monsters. Instead, the countless various footprints left on the ground attracted his attention. "Those monsters must have passed by here," Zuyun murmured, and looked up at the top of the mountain again, but his pupils suddenly shrank. The whole mountain was full of monsters, all of them were monsters. What shocked him even more was that all these monsters were crowding towards the top of the mountain, as if some supreme treasure was attracting them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 349. It is true that in Zuyun's view, these monsters are real, and the monster energy in them is not strong enough, so they do not pose any danger to him. But if you look around, you can see that they are densely packed, and the number of monsters is several times larger than the number of monsters seen in the illusion array before. Zuyun was a little afraid to get close. These monster beasts were crazy, even though he had seen the beast tide several times, he had never seen them so ferocious. But if he left just like that, Zuyun would be a little unwilling. This mountain appears so unexpectedly. It was also the first time I saw an unusual scene in this tower. Could it be that this mountain is the entrance to the next level? Suddenly, such an idea came into Zuyun's mind. Zuyun had been looking for an exit for days, almost ignoring that the demon refining tower was divided into 9 floors. From what I heard from Li Mo, the higher the level, the stronger the monster becomes. So, how is this different? It is the monster that becomes stronger through cultivation on the first level, and then moves to the second level on its own initiative. Or does the monster become stronger after reaching the second level? Zuyun still didn't know, but obviously, if he stayed here, he might be able to find some clues. After watching quietly for a long time, he kept using the void-breaking spiritual eye technique. And the monster beasts below are gradually crowding up, which shows that the monster beasts above are decreasing, which further confirms his idea. Zuyun thought for a moment and decided to follow the monster and take a look. Under normal circumstances, the monsters in the demon refining tower cannot leave. The fact that there are fewer monsters above means that these monsters have gone to another place. It seems that this is the entrance to the second floor. In order not to attract the attention of these monsters, Zuyun dispersed the void-breaking spirit eye technique, and at the same time transformed into a metal spirit, flew over lightly, and followed the monsters. I thought I could communicate with these monsters this way. But he didn't expect that these monster beasts were just roaring meaninglessly, not expressing any meaning at all. Zuyun touched his forehead and secretly thought that he was overthinking. These were low-level monsters with very low intelligence. They all acted on instinct. How could they communicate with each other? The demonic beast was not squeezing up very fast. Zuyun hung behind. After a few hours, he was already halfway up the mountain. When he turned back and looked down the mountain, he suddenly realized that it was a completely different scene. Not to mention not being able to find the place where I was standing before, I couldn't even see the bottom of the mountain. This mountain seems to be independent of this space. No wonder, no wonder. Those monsters didn't even notice where they were. Zuyun's breath tightened and he became cautious. With his previous experience with the phantom formation, he was even more convinced that this mountain was also in a formation. However, he was in the formation and couldn't use the void-breaking spirit eye technique. If he changes back to human form at this time, who knows whether it will cause these monsters to move. What worries him even more is that when he was still far away from the mountain, he couldn't see anything unusual even with the void-breaking spiritual eye technique. In this way, this formation is extremely powerful, far beyond the level of his void-breaking spirit eye technique. It seems that when the time comes to enter the Dao-glazed mirror, you will have to practice the void-breaking spiritual eye technique. This method is of infinite use and cannot be left behind. Looking further, he couldn't see anything, so Zuyun simply focused his attention in front of him. After another half an hour, Zuyun faintly heard human voices. He couldn't help but cheer up, flew a little higher, and quietly looked in the direction of the sound. It doesn't matter if you don't look at it. When you look at it, you will be shocked again. The two people who spoke were wearing the same clothes. He could not sense the state of these two people, but Zuyun could guess that these two people must be in the elixir formation stage. At the same time, looking at their movements, they seemed to be driving these monsters towards one place. Obviously, they are from Backfire City. Zuyun pondered in his heart and vaguely understood why he couldn't encounter the monster for so long. This was the problem. He must have made it to the second floor. The Lord of Naihuo City not only wants to trap and kill the monks, but he also won't let go of the monsters. Thinking of this, Zuyun secretly thought about countermeasures. There are all monsters here, but I am a metal spirit body. I guess I will be exposed to these people after the monsters are gone. After pondering for a moment, Zuyun came up with a plan. He silently recited the first level of the golden escape technique to turn himself into an ore with the same color as the mountain rocks. The conversation between the two monks was mixed with the roar of the monster, and he couldn't hear it clearly at all. But Zuyun knew that after the monster was gone, he would be able to hear it more or less. As the monsters gradually crowded up the mountain, Zuyun's vision gradually became brighter. Seeing that there were only dozens of them left, the voices of the two became clearer. Finally, it's almost done. All the monsters on the first floor have been driven away, right? On the left, an older monk stretched his body and said to his companions, "It's okay for monsters. After all, there is a way to control monsters. The trouble is with those ants. The companion complained. Zuyun sneered in his heart. It seemed that his guess was right. Those foundation building periods had also been driven away. Then this is undoubtedly the entrance to the second floor. That's right, those people are very useful to the city lord, but they can't be killed. It's really troublesome, but I'm exhausted. It's okay to be tired, but I'm afraid there are fewer people, and the city lord will use us to fill the hole. At this point, the two of them fell silent. Zuyun was even more shocked. These two people obviously know a lot. If they can catch a live one, they will surely gain something. But two Jindan stage cultivators are too risky. It seems that they can't stay in the demon refining tower for long. But at this time, it is not so easy for Zuyun to get out. Because all the monsters are gone, and a light gate also appears at the same time. The mission is completed. Should we go to the next level or wait here for a while? The cultivator on the left said. We must wait here. What if some blind casual cultivators also break into the demon refining tower? One more person rushes in, and we will be less dangerous. You are right. Anyway, the time given by the city lord is more than 20 hours. Let's wait until the end before going over. As the two cultivators spoke, they sat cross-legged on the ground, their faces full of fatigue. Zuyun smiled bitterly. Hearing what they said, he still had to be a mineral here for 20 hours. If I had known this, I would have come later. Hey, what do you think that is? At this moment, the cultivator on the left suddenly cried out in surprise, his eyes fixed on Zuyun. The man on the right looked over, his face lit up, and he said, how can there be such a large piece of ore in this mountain? What kind of ore is this? Do you know it? As he spoke, the cultivator's spiritual consciousness surged over, instantly covering Zuyun. I don't know it, but judging from the color, it should be a copper ore. It can be exchanged for a lot of spiritual stones if you take it out. The spiritual power seems to be quite rich. Why didn't we find it before? The two stood up while talking, and were about to walk towards Zuyun. Maybe there are too many monsters, and the demonic energy has obscured the spiritual power of this ore. It's possible. How about we divide this ore into two halves, one for each of us? Another person suggested. That's great. As they spoke, the two had already stood in front of Zuyun, and one of them even took out a long sword, pretending to chop at Zuyun. Zuyun was shocked. He never thought that these two people would be so straightforward. If he was hit by a sword, wouldn't he be cut in half? Immediately, he quickly recited the formula in his heart. Before the sword was cut, Zuyun had already turned into a metal spirit. Huh! The man holding the sword was surprised and doubtful, and then said in ecstasy, this is a metal spirit. I didn't expect that we would have such an adventure. What? Metal spirit? The other person's eyes suddenly showed a greedy look. It is said that the magic weapon refined with the metal spirit has a very high probability of growing a weapon spirit. This is a rare good thing. Don't hurt him, let's catch him first. Suddenly, two spiritual consciousnesses locked onto Zuyun almost at the same time. Zuyun secretly thought that no matter how fast the metal spirit was, it could not escape the pursuit of two Jindan stage. If he ran down the mountain, he would definitely not be able to escape. At this moment, there is only one way to choose. In a flash, Zuyun made the decision. In less than a tenth of a breath, he rushed forward without hesitation. Don't let him run away. With a loud shout, Zuyun felt a strong wind coming from behind him. He quickly controlled his body to twist, and his humanoid spirit body suddenly shrank by half, barely avoiding the monk's grab. This metal spirit is quite intelligent, don't underestimate him. The monk missed his attack and quickly reminded. but Zuyun took advantage of this moment and ran more than 10 steps away and dived into the light gate. The two of them suddenly widened their eyes, but soon they also rushed towards the light gate one after another. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 350. At this time, Zuyun had just passed through the light door, and with just a cursory glance, he discovered the monster in the distance. He could guess that the two Danja stagers would also follow. Without having time to observe the terrain, he immediately transformed into a human form and without saying a word, he created a bunch of heaven-gathering thunder talismans. It was impossible to run. Once he ran, his spiritual power surged and he would quickly attract the attention of those monsters. Moreover, if someone is driving or envoying these monsters, he will also be discovered. The ones guarding the first floor are two Danformation stage monks. The monks guarding the second floor are only stronger than weak. He stepped back slightly using the steps of the immortality secret. Then he saw a figure suddenly appear in the light door from which he came out. He no longer hesitated and immediately threw out all the more than 10 heaven-gathering thunder talismans. "Boy, who are you?" As soon as the pill formation stage broke out of the light gate, his spiritual consciousness immediately surged out, searching for the metal spirit body. However, he saw Zuyun, and he was still wondering why there was still a foundation formation stage left here. But after he finished speaking, his expression changed. "Because these thunder-gathering talismans have already triggered thunder." Boom. He subconsciously looked up and saw that in the sky, the wind and clouds were changing, dark clouds were pouring over the sea, and among them were thunder snakes entangled. Without even blinking, more than 10 thunderbolts fell straight down. This period of pill formation was extremely frightening, with boundless power falling from the sky. To him, every thunderstorm carried the power of destroying the heaven and the earth. How could he dare to think too much? Escape in the direction. At this time, another Danja stager also came out of the light gate. Without knowing anything, he was hit in the head by a thunderbolt. Ah! The screams started, but stopped suddenly. He has been blown into powder by this thunder. Death and destruction. And the Danformation stage that came out earlier was only a little better than him. He took a step forward, but he didn't completely escape the attack range of Tianli. One of the thunderbolts hit half of his body, and suddenly, only half of his left hand was left. The reaction during this elixir formation period is also extremely fast. Without saying a word, the golden elixir immediately escapes from the body. But he never thought that Zuyun would release more than a dozen thunderbolts at once. No matter how dexterous his golden elixir was, the thunderbolts were too fast. After surviving just one breath longer than his companions, the golden elixir was struck by lightning and disappeared into thin air. But Zuyun didn't have time to breathe. He knew that such a huge momentum would inevitably attract the attention of the monsters in front. Regardless of whether anyone was there or not, it was not good news for him. Without saying a word, he turned back and rushed into the light door. I saw a flash of light before my eyes, and he had already appeared between the hills on the first level. It seems that the passages on the upper and lower floors of the demon refining tower will not change. It is not like entering the first floor from the outside and the entrance will disappear. Zuyun looked around, then quickly swept along the other side of the mountain, and then with a flash of his body, he entered the Dewu glazed mirror. And at this time, second floor. Those monsters were all in chaos. As Zuyun guessed, these monsters were frightened by the huge minefield. In front of them, there were indeed several people in the Danformation stage. They used the techniques to control the beasts, but they could not completely control these monsters. They fled in all directions, and the huge thunder made them instinctively start to go crazy. Damn it, what happened just now? Why did thunder fall out of thin air? How do I know? Is it possible that there must be a strange treasure in the natural vision? Impossible. Don't think so much, and quickly control all these monsters. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, the city lord will be blamed, and I won't be able to explain it. I'm afraid we will have to fill the hole. There are 3 people controlling these monsters, all of whom are in the middle stage of pill formation. They received instructions from the Lord of Backfire City to drive all the monsters on the first floor to the designated location on the second floor. Also, because the monster beasts were hundreds of thousands in size, they were too far forward and had no idea what was happening behind them. The scattering of these monster beasts is enough to make them miserable. But Zuyun didn't know that at this time, he was hiding in the day-glazed mirror. When his frantic mind calmed down, he began to reflect on his action. The second level of golden escape technique is really easy to use, but it definitely won't work if it's in front of others. You still need to use it with caution in the future, and don't blindly rely on this technique. Metal spirit bodies are indeed rare treasures for monks. In the future, if you want to use the 5 elements escape technique, you still need to adapt to local conditions. If he had used the earth escape technique before, this wouldn't be the case. After thinking about it, Zuyun swallowed a pill and began to refine the medicine. After all his spiritual power was restored, he carefully left the mirror. After returning from the second floor, he hid here. Only when he came out now did he have time to observe his surroundings. No one was chasing him, so he breathed a sigh of relief and looked down the hillside. Under the mountain, a bright light caught his attention. It's exactly the same as the light door to the second floor. Could it be the exit? Zuyun thought for a moment, then quickly rushed towards the foot of the mountain. There were no people or animals everywhere, so Zuyun didn't have to worry at all. He increased his speed to the extreme and quickly reached the bottom of the mountain. Looking carefully, they are exactly the same. I didn't expect it. I hit it by mistake, but I can't rush it. I'll bring them here first. Zuyun walked half a circle around the bottom of the mountain and returned to where he was when he went up the mountain, and then hurried back along the original road. Through the conversations during the 2 pill-forming periods, he already knew that there were basically no monsters on the first floor of the demon refining tower, and there were very few monks, so he flew quickly with his sword without worrying about being discovered. Soon, he saw the bored big dog and others. Xiao Zhu is back. The big dog stretched out his hand and poked Chen Hua, who was recuperating next to him. At the same time, his voice also woke up Wu Neng and Wu Nan. At this time, Zuyun fell down and said excitedly, "Let's go, I found the exit, 9 times out of 10 I will." Real. Everyone's eyes lit up and they stood up quickly. I haven't gone in to try. I'm afraid that if I go in, I'll leave the demon refining tower. If you wait for me to come in again, what trouble will it be if I can't find you? Zuyun said with a smile and walked to the front to lead the way. Everyone hurriedly followed, walking very fast. After walking for about an hour, they suddenly noticed the mountain appearing in front of them. Follow me, there is also a formation here, but this formation is not very offensive. Seeing everyone's surprise, Zuyun quickly reminded them. Daegu and others followed Zuyun and walked around the bottom of the mountain, and sure enough they saw a door of light. Seeing that Zuyun was about to break in, he hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed Zuyun, saying, "Xiao Zhu, what if this is the door to the second floor?" Zuyun smiled and said, "The light door to the second floor is on this mountain. I have tried it and have been to the second floor. I also returned to the first floor from the light door. So I guess that this is leave the exit of the demon refining tower." "I see." The big dog was relieved, then looked at Zuyun and said, "Xiao Zhu, you don't have to accompany me back to Yunzhou, I can go back by myself." Zuyun knew the big dog's temperament. When he saw him stressing it again, he smiled and said, "I know. Anyway, just be careful. By the way, these talismans are reserved for you for self-defense." He gave him some heaven-gathering thunder talisman, Fire Bird Talisman and Earth Armor Talisman, and then some intermediate Heki pills. Then he patted his shoulder and said, "Practice well, I'll wait until you reach the nascent soul stage to be reshaped. Where's the body?" "Ha ha ha," the big dog smiled heartily and said, "Don't worry, I'll beat you up first when the time comes." Seeing the two of them so relaxed, Chen Hua couldn't help but feel a flash of loneliness in his eyes. He didn't know whether his choice was right or wrong. He touched a storage bag on his waist, which contained Li Molin's body. Zhu Yun said to Chen Hua again, "Hua Zi, the road to immortality is long, see you later." Chen Hua nodded heavily, walked forward, hugged Zhu Yun, and then hugged the big dog. "See you later. See you later." After saying goodbye one by one, Chen Hua was the first to enter the light gate. Wu Neng and Wu Nan also came forward. Wu Neng said some thanks, nothing more than thanking Zhu Yun for saving them, while Wu Neng was speechless and speechless. Zhu Yun smiled and said, "Do you also want some talismans?" Wu Nan was the first to say, "Fellow Daoist Chen, you have helped us a lot, and we have nothing to repay. And Mr. Lin only asked you to protect us in the demon refining tower." Zhu Yun waved his hand to stop him and took out some talismans. There were a few of each of the three types of talismans, and they were stuffed into Wu Nan's hands, and he said, "We are destined to meet each other. If you go to Shiwanda Mountain, you will definitely encounter dangers. However, after you have gained something, I still recommend that you don't. We're going back to Naihuo City. By the way, we're not going to Scarlet Flame City either." "Why?" Wu Neng asked quickly. Zhu Yun did not explain, but said seriously, "These two cities don't know that you have survived. If possible, I think you should find a way to stay in Shiwanda Mountain, which will be safer. Of course, don't go deep, it's also extremely terrifying inside Shiwanda Mountain." When he said this, he couldn't help but think of Qiu Qi and his father, the Fox King. "Thank you, fellow Daoist Chen. The clan leader and I are not very good at talking, so everything goes without saying." After saying that, Wu Nan bowed his hands and bowed in a great ceremony. Zhu Yun chuckled, and then watched them enter the light gate. Here, only Big Dog and Zhu Yun were left. "Xiaozu, Huazi, Li Molin, and I are here to look for them." The big dog pursed his lips towards the light door and said easily. Zhu Yun raised his eyebrows and turned to look at the big dog. "Anyway, be careful with the Silver Sword sect." Dago knew that Zhu Yun understood what he meant and did not need to explain. At the same time, after he had said everything he needed to say, he entered the light door without hesitation and disappeared in front of Zhu Yun. Zhu Yun stopped for a long time, then looked up at the top of the mountain. Next, it's time to practice on his own. Whatever conspiracy he may have as the Lord of Naihuo City, it has nothing to do with me. Taking steps, he quickly ran to the top of the mountain, found a corner, and entered the Diwu glazed mirror. Before breaking through the realm, Zhu Yun decided to practice the void-breaking spirit eye technique to the second level first.